They say you don't really know someone until they're gone. I used to think that was poetic nonsense, something people said to make loss sound prettier than it was. But standing in Nathan Hale's study 2 days after I buried him, holding a crumpled piece of paper that would unravel everything I thought I knew, I realized those words weren't poetry. They were a warning. Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back. I hope you're doing well, wherever you are in the world right now. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, yeah? And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, do me a favor and tap it now. You're going to want to stay for this one. Trust me, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we think hurt us the most were actually loving us in ways we were too blind to see. The funeral had been cold. Not the weather, though March in Connecticut had no mercy, but the atmosphere. A sea of black suits and designer dresses. People who knew Nathan Hale, the billionaire, the CEO, the untouchable force in commercial real estate. They didn't know the man who drank his coffee black at 5 a.m., who hummed old Motown songs under his breath when he thought no one was listening, who once stood in the rain for 20 minutes because a stray dog looked hungry. They didn't know him. And honestly, neither did I. Or at least, that's what I'd told myself for the past 3 years. Our marriage had been a contract. Literally. Signed on embossed paper with a lawyer present, my trembling signature next to his confident scrawl. 2 years, the document said. Play the role of his wife in public. Stay out of his business in private. In exchange, my mother's medical bills would be paid, my younger brother's college tuition secured, and I'd walk away with enough money to start over. It was supposed to be simple. It was supposed to be emotionless. It was supposed to end after 2 years. But Nathan got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 4 months before our contract expired. And suddenly, the man who barely looked at me across the breakfast table became someone I was legally bound to until death did us part. I stayed because leaving a dying man felt monstrous. He never asked me to, never guilt-tripped me, never even acknowledged the irony. He just accepted it, accepted me, accepted the cold distance I'd wrapped around myself like armor. Because of that night, the night that proved our marriage was exactly what I'd feared, a transaction. A lie, a mistake. I hadn't forgiven him. I wasn't sure I ever would. And now he was gone, and I was standing in his study surrounded by the remnants of a life I was never really part of, wondering why grief felt so much like regret. The room smelled like him, sandalwood and old books, with the faint ghost of the cigars he'd given up when the diagnosis came. His desk was neat, painfully so. Nathan had always been meticulous. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Except me. I was the one variable he never quite managed to organize. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Closure, maybe? Proof that I'd been right to keep my heart locked away. Permission to finally stop feeling like I'd failed at something I never truly signed up for? I pulled open the top drawer. Papers, pens, a pair of reading glasses he'd refused to wear in public. The second drawer held files, contracts, property deeds, things I'd never understand and didn't care to. The third drawer stuck. I yanked harder, frustration bubbling up. Frustration at him, at this house, at the fact that even in death, Nathan Hale was still keeping secrets. The drawer gave way. And there it was. A leather-bound journal, worn at the edges, the kind you'd buy at a boutique bookstore and actually use instead of letting it collect dust. I'd never seen it before. In 3 years of living in this house, sharing this space, I'd never known he kept a journal. My hands shook as I opened it. The first few pages were mundane. Meeting notes. Appointment reminders. A sketch of the skyline. Terrible, like a child had drawn it, and somehow that made my throat tighten. Then I saw it. Tucked between 2 pages. Folded so carefully it looked like it had been touched 100 times. Smoothed out and refolded with reverence. I pulled it free. At the top, in his slanted handwriting. My bucket list before I die. My heart hammered against my ribs. Buy back Mom's bakery. Visit Atlanta. Apologize to James. Tell Alana. I stopped breathing. Tell Alana I'm sorry for the lie. Make sure she knows she was never just a contract. And then at the very top, underlined twice. 1. Tell her the truth about that night. The paper slipped from my fingers. That night. The night I walked into his office and found him with her. Victoria Chun, his business partner, her hand on his chest, his tie loosened, the lights low. The night he looked at me with something I couldn't name, guilt maybe or pity, and said nothing. offered no explanation, no defense. The night I realized I'd been a fool to think a contract could ever protect my heart. I'd locked myself in the guest room that night and cried until my ribs ached. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would stay for the money for my family, but I would never, ever let Nathan Hale touch the parts of me that still believed in love. And I'd kept that promise. Even when he got sick. Even when I saw the fear creep into his eyes during the bad nights. Even when he whispered my name in his sleep like a prayer. I'd kept my distance. Because I thought I knew the truth. But now, holding this list, my hands trembling so hard I could barely read the words, I realized I didn't know a damn thing. What truth had Nathan been hiding? What really happened that night? And why did he take it to his grave? If you're hooked, and I know you are, drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever discovered something about someone after it was too late? Let's talk about it. And hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The bucket list sat on my nightstand like a living thing, pulsing with questions I didn't have answers to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's handwriting. That careful slant. The way he'd underlined that night twice, like he'd pressed the pen down hard, like the weight of those words had physical force. Tell her the truth about that night. What truth? I'd been there. I'd seen it with my own eyes. Victoria's hand on his chest, the intimate lighting, the guilt written across his face. What else was there to know? By 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I pulled on one of Nathan's old Harvard sweatshirts. I told myself it was just because the house was cold, not because it still smelled like him, and padded downstairs to his study. If Nathan had secrets, they'd be here. In this room where he'd spent countless late nights, door closed, keeping me out of yet another part of his life. I started with the journal. Most of it was boring. Business strategies. Notes about meetings. Reminders to call his mother. Each one made my chest ache a little because I knew he'd actually made those calls every Sunday at 2 p.m., like clockwork. But then, tucked near the back, I found entries that weren't about business at all. October 15th, 3 years ago. She signed today. Alana Pierce is now Alana Hale, at least on paper. She looked terrified sitting across from me in that conference room. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to do this, that I'd find another way to help her family. But I'm a selfish bastard. I wanted her in my life, even if it meant buying my way in. Even if it meant she'd never look at me as anything more than a transaction. God forgive me. My hands froze on the page. He'd wanted me? From the beginning? No, that couldn't be right. Our marriage had been his lawyer's idea. A solution to the board's concerns about his Playboy image affecting investor confidence. I was convenient, available, desperate enough to say yes. Wasn't I? I flipped forward, my heart racing. December 3rd. She made breakfast this morning. Just scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy. But she set a plate in front of me like it mattered. Like maybe I mattered. I almost told her then. Almost said, "This isn't what I want, this distance, this arrangement. I want to know what makes you laugh. I want to know why you bite your bottom lip when you're nervous. I want to know you." But I didn't. Because she deserves better than a man who started this whole thing with a lie. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. What lie, Nathan? What the hell were you talking about? January 20th. Saw her dancing in the kitchen today when she thought I wasn't home. Some old Aretha Franklin song on the radio, and she was just free, beautiful, completely herself in a way she never is around me. I stood in the doorway for 5 minutes, just watching, knowing I'd already ruined any chance of her ever dancing like that for me. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I remembered that day. I'd been making dinner, trying to distract myself from how lonely it felt to live with someone who barely acknowledged my existence. When I'd turned around and caught him watching me, something had flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like longing. But I'd shut it down immediately. Turned off the music. Went back to chopping vegetables in silence. Because I'd convinced myself that whatever I thought I'd seen was just my imagination playing tricks. Nathan Hale didn't long for anything. He acquired. He transacted. He controlled. He didn't feel. Or so I'd thought. The next entry was dated 3 days before that night. April 9th. Victoria cornered me after the board meeting. She knows. I don't know how. I've been so careful. But she knows about the investigation. Said if I don't give her what she wants, she'll make sure Alana finds out everything. Make sure Alana gets hurt. I can't let that happen. I won't. Even if it costs me everything. Even if she hates me for it. Especially if she hates me for it. Because her hating me and staying safe is better than her loving me and being destroyed. My vision blurred. What investigation? Who was going to hurt me? And what did Victoria have to do with any of it? I flipped to the next page so fast I nearly tore it. But it was blank. The rest of the journal was empty. Like he'd stopped writing after that entry. Like whatever happened next was too painful, or too dangerous, to put into words. Damn it, Nathan, I whispered to the empty room. What were you protecting me from? I spent the rest of the night tearing through his desk. Every drawer, every file, every scrap of paper. I found property deeds, investment portfolios, contracts for deals I'd never heard of. And then, in a locked drawer I had to jimmy open with a letter opener, I found a manila envelope marked with a single word. Alana. My name in his handwriting. Inside were photographs. Me, walking to my car. Me, having coffee with my friend Tessa. Me, leaving the grocery store. They were surveillance photos. Dated. Time-stamped. All from 3 years ago, right before Nathan and I got married. My stomach turned. Had he been stalking me? But then I looked closer. These weren't taken by Nathan. The angle was wrong, shot from too far away, too invasive. Professional. Someone had been watching me, and Nathan had known about it. Beneath the photos was a police report. Heavily redacted, but I could make out enough. Fraud investigation, offshore accounts, witness intimidation, potential targets. And there, highlighted in yellow, Alana Pierce, daughter of Margaret Pierce. My mother's name. What the hell had my mother been involved in? A folded note fell from between the pages. Nathan's handwriting again, but this time rushed, almost frantic. They were going to use you to get to her. I couldn't let that happen. The marriage was the only way to put you under my protection, to make you untouchable. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry for everything that came after. But I'd do it all again if it meant keeping you safe. N. The room tilted. Everything I thought I knew, every assumption, every moment of anger, every wall I'd built, crumbled like sand. Nathan hadn't married me for convenience. He'd married me to save me. I don't know how long I sat there, holding that note, tears streaming down my face. All those months of cold silence. All those nights I'd lain awake, convincing myself I meant nothing to him. All those moments I'd seen something flicker in his eyes and forced myself to look away, because I couldn't bear to hope. He'd been protecting me, and I'd hated him for it. Oh God, Nathan. I sobbed into the empty room. What did you do? But even through the tears, through the guilt and the grief, one question burned brighter than all the others. What really happened that night with Victoria? Because if Nathan had been protecting me all along, then what I'd seen in his office couldn't have been what it looked like. Which meant I'd spent the last year of his life punishing him for something he hadn't done. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. There was only one person who would know the truth. Victoria Chin. And I was going to make her tell me everything. Drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to realize you had it all wrong? Let's talk about it below. Victoria Chen's office was everything mine wasn't: sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Power radiated from every polished surface, every carefully chosen piece of art. This was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and took it without apology. I'd always envied that about her. Now I just wanted answers. Her assistant tried to stop me. Ms. Chun is in a meeting. I don't care. I pushed past her, my grief sharpening into something dangerous. Something that felt a lot like rage. Victoria looked up from her conference table, where 3 men in suits sat frozen mid-sentence. Her expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been guilt if I didn't know better. Alana. She stood smoothly, dismissing the men with a wave of her hand. Gentlemen, we'll continue this later. They filed out, shooting curious glances my way. The assistant closed the door behind them with a soft click that sounded too much like a trap snapping shut. I wasn't expecting you, Victoria said, her voice carefully neutral. I'm so sorry for your loss. Nathan was. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't you dare pretend to mourn him. Her jaw tightened. I know you're grieving, but... I found his journal. I pulled the bucket list from my purse, my hands shaking. I know about the investigation. I know someone was watching me. I know Nathan married me to protect me. For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria Chin looked genuinely rattled. I don't know what you think you know, but... Tell me about that night. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to something cold and sharp. "The night I walked in and found you with your hands on my husband. Tell me what really happened." She stared at me for a long moment, her perfectly composed mask cracking just slightly. Then she walked to her desk and pulled out a bottle of scotch, the expensive kind Nathan used to drink. "You should sit down." "I'll stand." She poured 2 glasses anyway, sliding one across the desk toward me. "Nathan made me promise never to tell you. Said it would put you in more danger if you knew everything. Nathan's dead." My voice broke on the word. "And I need to know the truth." Victoria took a long drink, then set down her glass with a heavy sigh. "Your mother wasn't just a nurse, Alana. She witnessed something she shouldn't have. A doctor at her hospital was running a prescription fraud ring, selling opioids to distributors, falsifying records. When she tried to report it, they threatened her." "Threatened you?" The room spun. "What?" "The people running that operation had connections. Money. Power. They couldn't risk her testifying, so they started surveillance. Started building a case to discredit her. And you were their leverage." I grabbed the edge of her desk to steady myself. "How did Nathan know about this?" "Because I told him." Victoria's voice was quiet now, almost ashamed. "The doctor running the operation, Dr. Marcus Webb, he approached me first. Asked me to help him move money through one of our real estate deals. When I refused, he made it clear that refusing wasn't an option. He had dirt on me too, insider trading from years ago, before I cleaned up my act. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd destroy me." "So you agreed?" "No." Her eyes flashed. "I went to Nathan, told him everything. And Nathan," her voice caught, "Nathan didn't even hesitate. He said he'd handle it, that he'd find a way to protect your mother, to protect you, and to get both of us out from under Webb's thumb." "The marriage," I whispered. "The marriage was brilliant, actually. Once you were Nathan Hale's wife, you became untouchable. Webb couldn't get to you without exposing himself to scrutiny from Nathan's lawyers, his security team, his connections. And Nathan used that time to build a case against Webb, working with the FBI, gathering evidence, making sure every piece of that fraud ring could be dismantled." My legs finally gave out. I sank into the chair behind me. "And that night," Victoria's face twisted with something that looked like genuine regret. "Webb found out what Nathan was doing. Threatened to kill you if Nathan didn't back off. So Nathan made a deal. He'd give Webb what he wanted, but only if Webb left you and your mother alone. The night you walked in on us, Nathan had just agreed to help Webb move a shipment of cash through one of our properties. I was trying to talk him out of it, telling him there had to be another way. But I saw, your hand on his chest, the way he looked. He'd just told me he loved you." Victoria's voice was barely audible now. "Said he'd do anything to keep you safe, even if it meant you'd never forgive him. Even if it meant you'd spend the rest of your life thinking he'd betrayed you. I was trying to convince him that you deserved to know the truth, that you'd understand. But he was adamant. Said the only way to keep you safe was to keep you in the dark." Tears streamed down my face unchecked. "He let me hate him." "He did." Victoria refilled her glass with a shaking hand. "And 3 days after that night, the FBI raided Webb's operation. Arrested him and 14 others. Your mother was safe. You were safe. And Nathan had to live with you looking at him like he was a stranger for the next year of his life. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "After he got sick, why didn't you tell me?" "Because he made me swear. Even when the cancer spread, even when he knew he was dying, he said, 'Let her think what she needs to think. Let her be angry. At least she'll be safe.'" Victoria's composure finally cracked, tears sliding down her own cheeks. "He loved you so much, Alana. More than I've ever seen anyone love anything. And he died believing you hated him for it." I don't remember leaving Victoria's office. Don't remember the drive home. I moved through the world like a ghost, Nathan's sacrifice wrapping around me like chains. He'd given everything. His reputation. My trust. Our marriage. His last year of life. All to keep me safe. And I'd spent that year punishing him for it. Back in his study, I tore through everything with new eyes. The journal entries I'd skimmed before suddenly made sense. Every cryptic reference. Every moment of restraint. She looked at me across the dinner table tonight, like I was a stranger. I wanted to tell her everything, about Webb, about the investigation, about how every moment I spend not touching her is killing me slowly. But her safety matters more than my happiness. It always will. The treatment isn't working. Dr. Morrison says I have maybe 6 months. I keep thinking about all the things I'll never get to tell her. Like how she hums when she's concentrating. How she leaves sticky notes with terrible jokes on the coffee maker. How the sound of her laugh is the only thing that makes this house feel like home. I'm running out of time. But at least she'll be safe. At least I did that one thing right. I pressed the journal to my chest and sobbed. That's when I found it, taped to the bottom of his desk drawer, a USB drive labeled for Alana. If you're reading this, I'm gone. My hands shook so badly I could barely plug it into my laptop. One folder. One video file. I clicked play. Nathan's face filled the screen, thinner than I remembered, the cancer already stealing his strength. But his eyes, those dark eyes that had watched me dance in the kitchen, that had looked at me with longing across 1,000 dinner tables. They were clear. Determined. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice cracked on the endearment, and I realized it was the first time he'd ever called me that. If you're watching this, then you found the bucket list. You know about Webb. About Victoria. About why I did what I did. He paused, running a hand through his hair. A gesture I'd seen 1,000 times but never really appreciated. I need you to know something. That night, the night you walked in on Victoria and me, that was the worst night of my life. Not because of Webb's threats. Not because I had to make an impossible choice. But because I saw your face when you looked at me, and I watched your heart break, and I knew I was the one who broke it. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to tell you everything. Wanted to fall on my knees and beg you to understand. But I couldn't risk it. Webb had people everywhere. In my company, in law enforcement, places I never expected. If you'd known the truth, you might have acted differently. Might have been in danger. And I couldn't, his voice broke. I couldn't let anything happen to you, Alana. I couldn't. He wiped at his eyes, and I realized he was crying too. I know you think our marriage was just a contract. Just a business arrangement. But for me, it was the realest thing I've ever done. Every morning I woke up and you were there. Even if you wouldn't look at me. Even if you couldn't stand to be in the same room. It was enough. You were enough. You were always more than enough. A sob tore from my throat. I'm sorry I couldn't give you the marriage you deserved. I'm sorry I spent our time together keeping you at arm's length when all I wanted was to hold you close. I'm sorry I died without ever telling you. He took a shaking breath. I love you. I've loved you since the day you walked into that conference room, scared and brave and so damn beautiful I forgot how to breathe. I've loved you every single day since. And I'll love you wherever I'm going next. He leaned closer to the camera, as if he could somehow bridge the distance between death and life. Live, Alana. Really live. Dance in the kitchen. Laugh too loud. Let yourself be loved by someone who deserves you. Someone better than me. Someone who won't break your heart to keep it beating. The video flickered. And if you can find it in yourself to forgive me, if you can remember me as something other than the man who hurt you, that would be enough. You would be enough. You always were. The screen went black. I sat there in the darkness of his study, my whole body shaking, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The love I'd been too scared to acknowledge. The grief I'd been too angry to process. The overwhelming, devastating realization that the man I'd convinced myself to hate had loved me with a fierceness that transcended every logical boundary. He'd sacrificed everything, his happiness, his reputation, our marriage, even my love, to keep me safe. And I'd spent his last year on Earth making sure he knew I hated him for it. But this couldn't be the end. Nathan wouldn't have left me the bucket list if he'd wanted me to drown in regret. I looked at the list again, my tears falling on the paper. 1. Tell her the truth about that night. He couldn't finish it, but I could finish it for him. 2. Buy back Mom's bakery. Nathan's mother, Dorothy, had sold her bakery 5 years ago when arthritis made it impossible to work. Nathan had always talked about buying it back for her, restoring it, but he'd never gotten the chance. I could do that. 3. Visit Atlanta. Nathan's father stayed in Atlanta, had died when Nathan was 12. He'd always wanted to visit, to connect with that part of himself, but work had always gotten in the way. I could do that too. 4. Apologize to James. James Morrison. I'd heard the name before. Nathan's college roommate, someone he'd had a falling out with years ago. I didn't know the details, but I could find out. I could finish what Nathan started. And maybe, in doing so, I could find a way to forgive myself for not seeing the truth when he was alive. Dorothy Hale opened her door with flour on her hands and surprise in her eyes. Alana, sweetheart, I didn't know you were coming. I should have called, I said, suddenly nervous. I needed to see you. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, like every good memory I'd never let myself have. Come in, baby. I just made peach cobbler. Her kitchen was warm and cluttered in the best way, so different from Nathan's sterile modern house. Pictures covered the refrigerator. Nathan as a boy, gap-toothed and grinning. Nathan at Harvard, serious and determined. Nathan and me on our wedding day, and the look on his face in that photo made my chest ache. He'd looked at me like I was something precious. How had I missed it? I found something, I said, pulling out the bucket list. Nathan left this. One of the items was buying back your bakery. Dorothy's hands stilled on the cobbler pan. Oh, that boy. He was always going on about that. I want to do it, I said. I want to buy it back for you. Restore it. Make it what it was. She turned to face me, her eyes shining with tears. Alana, honey, that's too much. It's not. I took her hands in mine. Nathan loved you so much. And he wanted this for you. Please, let me do this. Let me finish what he started. She studied my face for a long moment, then pulled me into another hug. He loved you too, you know. So much it scared him sometimes. I know, I whispered. I know that now. Over the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into Nathan's bucket list with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I met with the current owners of Dorothy's Bakery, a corporate chain that had stripped it of all its character, and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Nathan's wealth, the wealth I'd once resented, now felt like a gift, a way to make things right. I hired contractors to restore the original fixtures, to bring back the warmth and charm that Dorothy's Bakery had been famous for. And when Dorothy walked in on opening day, tears streaming down her face as she ran her hands over the vintage oven she'd thought was lost forever, I felt Nathan's presence so strongly it took my breath away. He's here, Dorothy whispered, looking around the restored bakery. Can you feel him? I could. In every detail I'd agonized over, every decision I'd made imagining what Nathan would have wanted. He was here. And for the first time since his death, that thought didn't just bring pain. It brought peace. Finding James Morrison was harder. He'd moved to Portland, was working as a high school music teacher, and when I finally tracked him down and called him, he was hesitant. I don't know if Nathan told you about what happened between us, he said carefully. He didn't, but he wanted to apologize. It was on his bucket list. A long silence. He made a bucket list. Yeah, and you were on it. Another pause. What happened between us? It was my fault. I borrowed money from him to start a business, and it failed. I couldn't pay him back. Instead of being honest about it, I just disappeared. Avoided him for 10 years. When I finally worked up the courage to reach out, I heard he'd gotten sick. He never blamed you, I said softly. In his journal, he wrote that he wished he'd tried harder to find you, that he missed his friend. James's voice broke. I miss him too. Come to Ghana with me, I said impulsively. Nathan wanted to visit his father's homeland. He wanted to take someone he cared about. I think he'd want you there. 3 months after Nathan's death, I stood on a beach in Accra with James Morrison at my side, scattering Nathan's ashes in the ocean that connected him to his father's people. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the waves sang a song that sounded like coming home. Thank you, James said quietly, for letting me be part of this. Thank you for coming. I think Nathan would have loved this. He loved you, you know. James gave me a sideways glance. I only met you once at the wedding, but even then I could see it. The way he looked at you, like you were the only real thing in a world of illusions. I watched Nathan's ashes disappear into the waves. I was so angry at him, for so long, and now all I have is regret. No, James said firmly. What you have is his love, and his trust. He trusted you to understand, eventually, to forgive him, to live the life he couldn't give you. I don't know how to do that, how to live without him when I only just realized what I had. You start by finishing that bucket list. And then, he smiled gently, then you make your own. When I returned home from Atlanta, there was a package waiting for me. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter and another USB drive. Dear Mrs. Hale, my name is Rebecca Torres. I was your husband's private investigator during the Webb case. He hired me to document everything. Every meeting, every threat, every piece of evidence, in case something happened to him. He wanted you to have the full picture. What you saw in his office that night with Victoria Chen was staged. Nathan had installed cameras that morning because he knew Webb was planning something. He needed proof of Webb's threats, proof of the coercion. When you walked in, he was in the middle of recording Webb's ultimatum. Cooperate or you'd be killed. Victoria was mic'd. So was Nathan. Everything they said was being recorded. The footage is on this drive. So is everything else. All the surveillance Webb's people conducted on you, all the threats they made, all the evidence that put them away. Your husband saved 14 people from Webb's operation, including you. I thought you should know. Rebecca Torres. My hands shook as I loaded the drive. Hours of footage, surveillance videos, audio recordings. And there, time-stamped from that night, the camera angle showing what I hadn't seen. Webb's men standing in the shadows of Nathan's office, guns visible beneath their jackets. Victoria's microphone picking up her whispered conversation with Nathan. We can get you protection. We can. No. If I fight this, they'll kill her. You know they will. I won't risk it. Nathan, you can't just. I can and I will. Let me handle this my way. And what about Alana? What about your marriage? My marriage was already over the moment I agreed to this arrangement. At least this way she gets to live. That's all that matters. And then my own voice sharp with betrayal. What the hell is going on here? The camera caught Nathan's face in that moment, and what I saw there broke me all over again. Not guilt. Not shame. Relief. Because I'd interrupted before Webb's men could force him into anything worse. Because my anger, my hurt, gave him a reason to end the meeting, to send Victoria away, to deal with Webb on his own terms. He'd used my pain as a shield, and I'd never known. The rest of the footage showed everything. Nathan working with the FBI. Victoria wearing a wire to meetings with Webb. The raids. The arrests. And through it all, Nathan's face getting thinner, his movements slower as the cancer spread, but his determination never wavering. In the last video on the drive, dated 2 weeks before his death, Nathan sat in what looked like a hospital room, speaking directly to the camera. If Rebecca gave you this drive, then you know everything now. All of it. I need you to understand. I never regretted protecting you. Not for a second. Even when you couldn't stand to look at me. Even when I knew I was dying without ever hearing you say you forgave me. He leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion written in every line of his face. But I have one more thing to tell you. Something I couldn't put in the journal, because I didn't want you to feel obligated. My breath caught. After I'm gone, you're going to find out that I changed my will. Everything, the house, the money, all of it, it's yours. Not because of the contract. Not because I felt guilty. But because you're my wife, Alana. For real. And I want you to have the life you deserve. Tears blurred the screen. But more than that, I set up a foundation in your name. The Pierce Foundation for Witness Protection and Medical Advocacy. It helps people like your mother, people who witness crimes and need protection, people who are caught between doing the right thing and staying safe. My hands covered my mouth. I've funded it with enough money to run for decades. And I've named you as the director, if you want it. If you don't, that's okay too. But I thought maybe you could turn what happened to us into something good. Something that helps other people. He smiled then, weak but genuine. Live beautifully, Alana. Love fearlessly. And know that somewhere, wherever I am, I'm watching you dance in the kitchen and falling in love with you all over again. The video ended. 6 months after Nathan's death, I stood in front of a room full of people at the grand opening of the Pierce Foundation. Dorothy sat in the front row, beaming. James had flown in from Portland. Victoria Chen was there too, her support both surprising and deeply moving. And in my pocket, folded carefully, was Nathan's bucket list, all items checked off. My husband taught me that love isn't always loud, I said, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's sacrifice. Sometimes it's letting someone hate you, so they can stay safe. I looked out at the faces watching me, survivors of fraud rings, domestic violence victims, whistleblowers who'd risked everything to do the right thing. This foundation exists because Nathan Hale believed that doing the right thing shouldn't cost you everything. That people who stand up against evil deserve protection, deserve support, deserve to be more than victims. My voice grew stronger. He gave his life for that belief. And now it's our turn to carry it forward. The applause was deafening, but all I could hear was Nathan's voice in my head. Live beautifully, Alana. I was trying. God, I was trying. That night, I went back to Nathan's study, our study now, and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote, Alana's bucket list. 1. Forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. 2. Make sure Nathan's sacrifice meant something. 3. Learn to love again, not despite the pain, but because of it. 4. Dance in the kitchen without crying. 5. Live a life big enough to honor both of us. I stared at number 3 for a long time. Learning to love again felt impossible. How could I give my heart to someone else when it still belonged so completely to a man I'd never have again? But then I remembered what Nathan had said in his video. Let yourself be loved by someone who deserves you. He wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life alone, drowning in regret. He'd want me to live. I started small. Coffee with Tessa, my best friend who'd watched me fall apart and put myself back together. Volunteering at Dorothy's Bakery on weekends. Learning to make the peach cobbler that tasted like home. Running the foundation with a passion that surprised me. Every person we helped felt like a way of honoring Nathan's memory. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed, the grief began to shift. It didn't disappear. I don't think it ever would. But it transformed into something I could carry. A weight that made me stronger instead of breaking me. 8 months after Nathan's death, James called me. I'm moving back to Connecticut, he said. I got a job teaching music at a private school in Hartford. And I was wondering, I know this might be weird, but would you want to get coffee sometime? As friends. I miss having someone to talk to about Nathan. Someone who understands. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Our first coffee turned into 2, then 3, then long conversations that stretched into evening, sitting in Dorothy's Bakery after closing, talking about Nathan and loss, and what it meant to keep living when part of you was gone. James never pushed. Never tried to be anything more than a friend. But there was a gentleness in the way he listened. A kindness in the way he spoke about Nathan without flinching from the hard parts. You know what he told me once? James said one evening, 6 months into our friendship. He said that if anything ever happened to him, I should check on you. Make sure you were okay. Not in a romantic way. He was very clear about that. Just as a friend. As someone who understood loss. He asked you to take care of me? Not take care of. Just be there for. There's a difference. I smiled through my tears. Even from beyond the grave, he was protecting me. That's what love does, James said softly. It doesn't stop just because someone's gone. Part 7, Full Circle. A year after Nathan's death, I threw a party at Dorothy's Bakery. Not a memorial. Not a fundraiser. Just a celebration of life. Of Nathan's life. Of the Foundation's first year of success, of all the ways we'd learned to carry our grief and still find joy. Dorothy made enough peach cobbler to feed an army. Victoria brought champagne. The good stuff. James played guitar in the corner, old Motown songs that Nathan used to hum. And I danced. Not the careful, controlled dancing I'd done when Nathan was alive, always aware of the walls between us. I danced like I had that day in the kitchen when he'd watched me from the doorway. Free and alive and completely myself. He'd love this, Dorothy said, pulling me into a hug. You happy. Living. That's all he ever wanted. I know, I whispered. I finally know. That night back at the house, my house now, though I'd never quite stopped thinking of it as ours, I found one last surprise. A letter, tucked inside the journal I'd read so many times I had pages memorized, in a section I'd somehow missed before. My darling Alana, if you're reading this, then you've finished the bucket list. You've learned the truth. You've forgiven me, or at least I hope you have. There's one more thing I need you to know. That first day in the conference room, when you signed the contract with shaking hands and fear in your eyes, I knew. I knew you were the one. The only one. I told myself it was crazy. That you can't fall in love with someone in a moment. That love takes time and shared experiences, and all those things the poets talk about. But I did. I fell in love with you the second you looked at me and said, I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family, because I recognized myself in you. That fierce, desperate love that would sacrifice anything. And I thought, if I could make you happy, even for a little while, even in this strange arrangement, maybe I could be worthy of that kind of love myself. I never was, of course, but you made me want to be. So here's my final wish for you. Don't let my mistakes define your future. Don't let the love we never got to have stop you from finding the love you deserve. Be brave, Alana. Be bold. Be the woman I saw dancing in the kitchen, the woman who fights for her family, the woman who built a foundation to help strangers because her heart is too big to be contained by grief. And if you find someone who makes you laugh the way I never could, who holds you the way I never got to, who gives you the life I wish I could have given you, don't feel guilty. Feel joy. For both of us. I'll be watching. And I'll be so proud. All my love, forever and always, Nathan. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of gratitude. For the love Nathan had given me, even in the shadows. For the sacrifice he'd made without ever asking for recognition. For the gift of finally understanding what we'd meant to each other. And for the permission to move forward. 2 years later, the Pierce Foundation had helped 83 people in its second year. Dorothy's Bakery was a neighborhood institution again, with a line out the door every Saturday morning. And I was standing in front of a mirror in a simple white dress, my hands shaking for entirely different reasons than they had 3 years ago. You look beautiful, Tessa said, adjusting my veil. I feel like I'm betraying him, I whispered. Nathan. She took my hands firmly. Girl, Nathan would kick your ass if he heard you say that. He literally wrote you a letter telling you to fall in love again. I know, but no buts. James loves you. You love him. And Nathan loved you enough to want you to be happy, even if it meant you'd be happy with someone else. I took a shaky breath. You're right. I know you're right. Of course I'm right. Now come on. Your future husband is waiting. James stood at the altar with tears already streaming down his face. You're supposed to wait until I get there to start crying, I teased as I reached him. Sorry, he laughed, wiping his eyes. I can't believe you're real. That this is real. The officiant began the ceremony, but I barely heard it. All I could think about was the journey that had brought me here. Through grief and guilt, through discovery and redemption, through learning that love didn't diminish when you shared it with more than one person. Nathan would always be part of me. The foundation would always bear his mark. But James was my future. And I was ready for it. I do, I said when the moment came, my voice clear and certain. And as James kissed me, as our friends and family erupted in applause, I swear I felt a warmth around me that had nothing to do with the summer sun streaming through the windows. Live beautifully, Nathan's voice whispered in my memory. I thought back. I finally am. That night, after the reception, after the dancing and the cake and the endless photographs, I stood alone in the venue's garden with a single white rose. Thank you, I whispered to the stars, for loving me, for protecting me, for giving me permission to be happy. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could almost hear his response. Always, sweetheart. Always. I placed the rose on the garden bench, a small memorial, a quiet goodbye, and walked back toward the light and music and laughter. Toward James, who waited with open arms and an understanding smile. Toward the life Nathan had wanted me to have. And as I crossed that threshold, moving from the darkness of grief into the light of new love, I felt the weight I'd been carrying finally, blessedly lift. Not because I'd forgotten Nathan, but because I'd finally learned what he'd tried to teach me all along. That real love doesn't end with death. It transforms. It grows. It becomes the foundation on which you build everything that comes next. And I was ready to build. The end. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If Alana's story touched you, if it made you think about the people you've misjudged or the love you've taken for granted, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories about love and loss and redemption, are what we're all about here. Until next time, remember, the people who love you aren't always the ones who say it loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who sacrifice in silence, hoping you'll understand someday. Live beautifully, love fiercely, and never, ever take a single moment for granted. See you in the next story. Red Heart.